Tere päevast, good day. So I have on my hand a book, it's English language book, may contain lies. I thoroughly enjoyed it, so thank you, Alex. It is highly recommended. But why we supported publication of this book, there are a couple of reasons. The first one actually is that it doesn't mention KPMG, so that's a good sign, so we don't do mistakes. It does mention some of our competition. So the second reason is that I'm trained as a scientist, and I believe that data, facts, and interpretation of these facts and data are important. Charlie Munger has said that he has not met a single intelligent person who does not read extensively and intensively. And I practice what I preach. I put up my own reading list in LinkedIn quarterly, so you can go there and see. And finally, I have to quote a childhood hero, Morrissey, who sang that life's more than books, but not much more. But let's start with why question, Alex. So why did you write that book? Why it is important?
So, as a professor, my goal is not just to write academic papers, just to sit in a library or to be published in an academic journal, but to have this research influence the way that practitioners act, the way they run companies, the way they invest money, the way they even pass law. And for the last at least 10, 15 years, I've been trying to use the findings of research, not just my own, but other professors, to influence business. But I realise that often how people respond to this depends on whether they like the findings rather than whether that it's actually accurate. And this is not their fault, because yes, they suffer from biases, but so do I. And actually in the book I give examples of where I suffer from confirmation bias. It is human. So what I want to do was just to highlight the problem of these biases and provide a simple guide to what we can do about it. Some of you might know Daniel Kahneman's amazing book, Thinking Fast and Slow, about how we make mistakes when choosing between different alternatives. I'm similar in spirit, but about how we make mistakes when interpreting information. And just like Kahneman took his Nobel Prize-winning insights and made them accessible, I took my insights, sadly not yet Nobel Prize-winning, but also trying to make them accessible to the public.
And I have to compliment you, because I personally like your book better than Kahneman, but I do something with my brain.
Wow, that's a big
of course, personal choice, but etc. But the second why is actually that why we do so many mistakes. Mm-hmm. Why there are so many mistakes, why we want to believe some stuff that is not true.
It's not because we're bad people, it's because we're people. And we're people, we have our biases, we have our view of the world, and if you see something that supports your view of the world, it releases dopamine in the bloodstream, we lap it up uncritically. So even if deep down we know that correlation is not causation, if we like the story being paraded, then we will lap it up uncritically. And in contrast, if we see something that counters our belief, it lights up the amygdala. So that is the part of the brain which is activated when a tiger attacks us and invokes a fight or flight response. So we respond to something we don't like just as if we're having a tiger attack. For example, in the Brexit referendum, I was a very strong Remainer. I thought that anything that somebody said in favour of Brexit was just because they were racist or xenophobic. But then when I forced myself to go to my first Brexit talk, I was actually quite surprised. The person was logical. I disagreed with his conclusion, but I could at least see the logic behind his argument. And so only once I was able to overcome my own bias and try to listen open-mindedly to another side did I actually have a slightly different viewpoint.
Yeah, one of the sections I like very much is that you discuss HBR, or Harvard Business Review. And your conclusion is that we teach CEOs, we teach business by stories, not science. Mm-hmm. And this is scary.
It is very scary. So what do we do? And again, we, including me, it's my profession of business schools, we love to use case studies. And if you want to use this case study, you find the one most dynamic and vivid example of something working. So let's say you want to find humble leadership does better. You find the one example of a humble leader who was successful, and maybe his or her success was luck. It could be due to many things other than their humility. You could have a lot of non-humble leaders, let's say tech people in the US who are successful despite their lack of humility, and sometimes you actually need courage to overcome sort of challenges and adversities. But if you just choose one particular example and dress this up in a story, then we like it. And it's not just Harvard Business Review, but TED Talks. They say start every TED Talk with a story. I've done so with my own one, because people remember them. And again, this is something deeply rooted in us from the oral tradition that we had. Before we had writing, people would pass information through stories, so we always latch onto stories rather than statistics, even though a story could be a single isolated case.
Yeah, you also discuss that one should read widely, so you should try to read maybe right-wing, you I think refer to Telegraph, and left-wing Guardian. And I have a personal question. I really tried. God knows I have tried, so to read Guardian. But to me, it's a little bit like reading Rafael and Nortehääl. No, some people might know that from Soviet times. But how you can read Guardian? It's so difficult for me.
Yeah, so I read The Guardian, even though I do believe in the power of capitalism and companies to create value for society. Why? Because I want to find my blind spots. Is that when I make arguments, or if I was to write articles, I want to know what's wrong. And I want to know that before I see the criticism of my article. So I'm doing this to be selfish, not to be open-minded, is I want to see, well, what other people might be criticizing about free trade or the capitalist system. And even if 90% of what I think in a different article is wrong, maybe 10% is right, and that 10% is something that then I come away with more informed and able to have more balanced articles myself.
Yeah, so thank you. It is possible. That's good. I still find it difficult. But let's come to the solutions and suggestions, because you do it on 3 levels. You talk about on individuals, you talk about organizations, and you talk about societies. So what would be your advice to organizations? We have quite a lot of CFOs, how they could improve fact-based, science-based thinking and decision-making in their organizations.
Thank you. And I think this is really important. It's to promote a culture of dissent and psychological safety where people can challenge each other, and these challenges are taken seriously rather than being seen as not being a team player. And this is really difficult, because when we think about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, people only focus on the diversity aspect, not on inclusion, which is to allow people to share their different viewpoints without fear of recrimination. So right now, I'm doing a project called the Cognitive Diversity Project. It's run by a UK body of asset managers to promote diversity in asset management, broadly defined. We will have a report which will be launched in the House of Lords in a couple of months' time, with practical recommendations on how to create psychological safety within your organizations. There is some already in chapter 10 of this book, but this report will be out later in a few months' time. Even though it focuses on asset management, it's applicable to all companies. Let me just give you a few sort of spoilers now. One of them is just in a meeting, just try to start with the junior people first. And junior might be, even if your meeting is with the senior management team, or if your meeting is a board, it might be the newest members of the board. Why, if you as the chair start with your view first, then often people will anchor on your viewpoint. Let's say in that meeting, somebody expresses a different view, and you still go ahead and make the decision anyway, because you discuss it carefully, and you decide, well, actually, the pros outweigh the cons. Maybe after the meeting, go to that person and say, hey, I really appreciate you speaking up, and I know that that would have taken some courage. Even though we didn't go ahead with your proposal, we will still bear in mind all your concerns when we execute the plan. Why is that so important? If you didn't do that, the person thinks, well, I spoke up, that used some political capital, and I didn't change the decision anyway, so I just wasted half an hour of everybody's time. The next time I have a concern, I'm going to keep it to myself. But instead, if you go out of your way to show how much you value different viewpoints, even if they're uncomfortable, even if they lead to additional discussion, then this makes sure that you have a culture where people are highlighting the blind spots. And I don't need to give the examples of, say, Deepwater Horizon or Silicon Valley Bank, where there were cases in which people's blind spots were not highlighted and these companies failed.
Okay, you have quite a lot of scary stories here, and people who I would also encourage to look at Alex's TED Talk. But maybe you have what is maybe the most scary story to you right now, and of course I'm a little bit referring to Donald Trump. So do you have any fact-checking about Donald Trump or what is currently going on in the world?
Yeah, so this is, I think, quite concerning in terms of his approach to tariffs, where I know the Deputy Treasury Secretary, who is a very smart finance professor, but it might be in order to advance to those positions, you're not allowed to tell Trump that he's wrong. You get chosen based on being a yes man or a yes woman. And I think this is problematic, because if you didn't have the people telling him, hey, all of these tariffs are going to cause problems, then you make a decision and then you get public humiliation because the markets keep going down. You then have your former supporters like Bill Ackman and Elon Musk saying that these are really bad ideas. So this is why dissent might be difficult to hear, but it's much better for you to hear that internally rather than to make a decision and see quite some public problems. And this is why, back to your point, I still find it difficult to read The Guardian. So I'm absolutely not a perfect person, even though I write about this. It's still difficult, but what makes me do this is the recognition that I would rather see this issue first myself rather than other people see it. With the diversity project I'm working on, before I sent it to the steering group, I paid 3 of my MBA students to read it and criticize it as much as possible so that I had their criticism first and I could address it before it went to these more senior people.
Okay, so we are out of time, but thanks a lot. Let's give applause, I think, that to Alex. Thank you. Really
Thank you so much, Hanno. Oh.